or if this is your first time on my live. I know we have some new folks this week. I am Dr. Tony. This is my amazing community. I'm so glad to have you here today. And I'm going to hop right in because I love this question. And my guess is that plenty of you have had this question and just haven't asked it. So I'm glad that it was asked. And that is, I feel like I know what to do. I just cannot stick with it. Or sometimes I can't start it. I get that sometimes too. Like, I know what to do, I just don't do it. Or I know what to do and I tried it, but I just can't stick with it. Or I know what to do, but it's too hard or too time consuming or too much money or whatever. Like, I know what to do, but let me know if you can relate to that, okay? And so I'm careful about giving advice here. And so I'm not going to tell you that I'm giving you specific personal advice. I am going to give some guidance and some examples about my experience with folks that I've worked with. And if it's something that comes up with you that connects with you and you have questions about that, put those down there so I see them pop up and I can answer them. Or if you just want to message me separately, that's cool. So let's just think about how this shows up in people's lives, because I can tell you just this week how this has shown up in my life, for example. So there's been some shifts in my schedule recently, and so I'm in kind of like a limbo place of reorienting my schedule, which means I had to shift my priorities. Long story short, I haven't been holding myself accountable in my Fitbit about what I'm eating. And so I know what I need to do to hold myself accountable and to maintain my health and to make sure that I'm putting things in my body that are healthy for me and staying within a caloric intake that's good for my body, right? I know what to do, but I didn't do it this week. Why? I didn't do it because the stakes weren't high enough for me. I was like, these other things are my priority. This is not my priority right now. And so I'm not going to focus on it. I'm just going to focus on the other stuff. I'm going to stay busy and do these other things I need to get done. So that's just one simple example. But people do this with dieting all the time, right? Like, I know how to be healthier. I know how to lose weight. I've read the books. I've watched the videos. I've whatever. Like, I've done the research. I have the information, but I just keep eating junk anyway. Or I'm just not losing weight because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Or nothing's working, right? Have you heard that? I know you've heard that because people say that all the time. And it's the same thing with relationships. Well, I really want to be in a healthy relationship with someone that respects me, that I respect. But I know I need to work on my communication and I know I need to put my boundaries down more, but right? So there's always this like, I know this, I have this information, but this justification, this reason why it's not happening, right? So this is a very common phenomenon. This isn't something that is unique to just this one person. This is happening all the time, all right? And so really what's happening is that the stakes are not high enough. You're too comfortable in the familiar. You're too comfortable staying here, even though you know it's not serving you, even though it's not going to get you to your end goal. You're more comfortable staying there. And so anytime you're talking about a transformation, which is what I do in my coaching programs, right? So in the group, we're talking about inspiration and information. But if you're looking for transformation, you're not, the group is not going to get you the transformation. The transformation is when you recognize that the stakes are too high for you and you need to actually do something about it. A transformation requires commitment. It doesn't happen with wishful thinking or just like some interest in it or just a desire even, but it requires a legitimate commitment. So for example, this week, do I desire to hold myself accountable and make sure that regardless of what's happening in my life, that I'm, putting my stuff in my Fitbit so that I'm making sure I'm keeping a healthy intake of whatever it is that I'm eating for my body on a day-to-day? Yes, I desire that. Do I wish that that was something I did every day? Absolutely. But ultimately, that is not going to happen unless I commit 100%. And then I recommit every time I have to make the choice about what I'm going to put in my mouth. And if I'm not focused on that and I'm not intentional about that commitment each time that option comes up for me to recommit, then it's not going to happen. And so for me, I didn't do that this week because the stakes weren't high enough for me. For me, I was focusing on these other things that from the stakes were higher in those other things. And so I prioritized those and I got those done. And so how does that apply to your question? I feel like I know what I need to do. And so I'm assuming this person is talking about getting out of overwhelm, getting out of burnout, right? But I just can't ever stick with it. And this is similar to my client, Molly, who recently shared in here that she works with me, is, you know what? She had done meditation, journaling, like yoga, like Reiki, like she had done all of the things. So she's like, oh, I know to do this, or I know to try this. So she had done all of this for years before she ever came to me. And it didn't work for her sustainably. It wasn't about the information. In fact, the transformation wasn't even about the inspiration. The ultimate turning point was that willingness to commit at the forefront, and then also to recommit every single time, because there was a raised awareness that the stakes were just too high to stay where she was at. And so if my health deteriorates, if I keep up this way and I decide not to commit myself to show up for whatever works for you, but for me, the holding myself accountable and putting it in through my Fitbit, putting it in my my Fitness Pal, putting it in there helps me to hold myself accountable. If I'm not going to do that, it's not going to work for me. But if I do, and I'm like, you know what, the stakes are so high that my health is deteriorating, so now this is no longer an option. This can no longer be a lesser priority for me. Like, my health is deteriorating. The stakes are too high. I'm going to commit. And I'm going to keep recommitting because I decided the stakes were so high, because I was intentional and clear that the stakes are high for me, so high that I am not willing to accept the cost of staying here. Does that make sense? So it really depends. Have you been going at it from a place of, I want a transformation in my life, so I'm going to show up committed? Or have you been going about it as, you know what, I really desire this and I'm interested in it, and so you're not fully committing. You're not fully committing and willing to recommit every time a decision comes up that's going to impact whether you're going to stay in burnout or burn out and overwhelm or not. Because it really does take commitment. Does that make sense? Let me know what your thoughts are, y'all. When you pop on, let me know. So I'm just going to keep an eye out and see what you guys think. So, but you've become really accustomed to committing. A lot of achievers, helpers, leaders become accustomed to committing to these outside things. And so I have had sometimes some people say, what? Like, I'm a committed person. Like, what do you mean I'm not showing up committed? Well, I mean, you're choosing where to show up committed, right? And that's just a matter of being honest with yourself. So where are you choosing to show up committed in your life, and where are you not? Just because you're committing to one thing in one way doesn't mean you're committing to the other thing. And what usually happens is this. You become accustomed to committing to the tangible, to producing results, to staying busy. You're super committed to those external actions, right? The doing. But that kind of commitment is different than the kind of commitment that comes with really shifting, transforming your life out of burnout and overwhelm and into a balanced and joyful life. That kind of balance, that kind of joyful life, the commitment that comes with that is a commitment to get vulnerable and then to recommit when you get vulnerable. That commitment requires turning inward, not focusing on that external stuff, and doing inner work, which loads of people think and feel and believe that if you turn inward and you're not doing these tangible physical things on the outside, then you're not doing anything. But that is so not true. And so what they convince themselves is, oh, well, I'm not doing anything if I'm doing the internal work. I'm not producing anything. I'm not making any progress. So doing that inside stuff, it's a waste of my time. It's irrelevant. And so the stakes aren't high enough for me to do that. I don't see the connection. I don't see the benefit. Therefore, I'm not going to show up and do it. That is part of the commitment that has to happen to transform your life from a place of burnout, overwhelm, bad relationship cycles that keep happening over and over and over again, poor dieting cycles, like whatever the old pattern is. If you want to transform your life, if you want to break these limiting beliefs, if you want to change the behaviors that you've been doing for years and years and years and years and years, then it requires a transformation. And the transformation requires reoccurring commitment to show up. And that means you have to get clear on the stakes. And so I've talked about getting clear in here before. It's one of the reasons why I created my reality check, the self-assessment for your wellness that you can do totally on your own. I'll put the link below if you want to do that. But it's one of the reasons I created it, because if you're not clear on the stakes, if you're not clear on what it's costing you to stay where you are at in this burnout, overwhelm, emotional exhaustion, cold, resentful, angry state, if you're not clear on what that's costing you, then you are going to continue to justify staying there because it's comfortable. And so you have to sit down, be honest with yourself, and get really clear about the stakes, what it is costing you to stay here. And what I read in this sentence, in this question of, I feel like I know what I need to do, I just can't ever stick with it. Any advice? What I read is, you're not super clear on the stakes. And that's normal, because probably what has happened, it's normal for my population, my people, my tribe. It's normal for those who are highly driven, highly ambitious, constantly caring, giving, and compassionate beings to not focus on their internal feelings and instead to focus on giving and doing and helping others. Okay? So you've conditioned yourself to go there for reasons. It's not like they're unjust reasons or invalid reasons. There's reasons why. Okay, but here's the costs that happen now that you're aware that this is going on and the stakes are something that you need to consider. Here are some of the common stakes that I see, some of the common costs that I see come up when clients come to me and start talking to me. Relationships, okay? So they deeply desire to feel connected and have meaningful, intimate relationships where they can show up and be vulnerable, but instead they have these toxic relationship patterns that just keep happening over and over and over again that they can't get out of, or they get super close and then they self-sabotage and the relationship doesn't work out, or it keeps going on and off and on and off and on and off because they aren't clear on the stakes that it's costing them to stay there and not address the issues. So they stay in the familiar even though they know it's unhealthy, even though they don't want to be there, right? Other costs, spiritual. So not living out and fulfilling your purpose, or not even being clear on what your purpose and passion really is, and emotional, that constant self-doubt and shame, the emotional reactivity when you're stimulated from outside situations or from people that might say something they don't even mean to trigger you, but they do. And the physical, I hear literally all the time about the fatigue, about the aches, about the medical issues. I myself had been there when I was in burnout, about the mental cost, the psychological things that are going on, the chronic stress and anxiety. That inescapable feeling of overwhelm is an incredibly high stake because it shows up and then affects all of those other pieces, the relationships, the spiritual, the emotional, the physical, and the professional. Because you're not having this optimal performance. You're not actually showing up as well as you possibly can. And you know what? You're probably showing up at work okay, or even great, depending on what level you hold work ethic and excellence at and how you've been conditioned to show that. But is that really your optimal performance? And is this profession or the place where you're at right now even where you are supposed to be performing optimally with alignment of your passion and your purpose? I don't know, because we have to take the time to get clear on that. And if you're constantly doing, going, being, hustling for others, then you haven't taken the time to turn inward, show up for yourself, and really gain clarity on what the stakes are, what it is costing you to stay here. The stakes aren't high enough. If I boil your question down to one answer, your stakes are not high enough because you have not gotten enough clarity. So if you aren't willing to sit down and get clear on what the stakes are for you, what it's costing you to stay here, then you will just keep convincing yourself that this is justifiable. It's okay to stay here. The cost isn't that high. I might as well just hang out here, right? And you'll always be wondering, is there more for me? There's supposed to be more for me, but you won't move towards it because you haven't gotten clear on the stakes, and therefore you haven't shown up committed and then recommitted, and therefore the transformation cannot happen. And part of that transformation and commitment is to say, I accept help from an expert that knows what they're doing. I'm not going to do this on my own because I've tried to do it on my own, and I acknowledge that it's not going to work. I am too overwhelmed to do it on my own right now. And because I care about the stakes so much, I'm willing to show up, commit, and to invest in myself and my wellness and my future because I know that it's costing me even more to stay here now.